So Jenna Rindalucci is the art and architecture librarian at UNC-Charlotte, where she helps faculty and students with instruction, research support, digital humanities projects. She's going to show you a couple of the open source and free or low cost tools that are available for helping faculty. This is a session that we've had requested a couple times over. I know that when I was a grad student in library school, I was thrown into helping a student with a digital humanities project, and it just kind of snowballed into me helping a whole class with it one semester. And I can say that it's not easy getting into it. There's a lot of quirks to some of the tools that are involved. And so I think it's going to be really nice to have Jenna share everything that you can use to get started with digital humanities. And then I will hand it over to her now.
Great, thank you. Should I just go ahead and share my screen? Is that the easiest?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Here we go. Can everyone see that? Great. And are you just seeing this like the intro slide, or are you seeing the notes too?
Just seeing the intro slide.
Okay. So I don't think everyone wants to see my notes as well. Okay, so as Devin was saying too, the intention with this is really to kind of give you a nice overview of some of the low entry, mostly free. If they're not free, they have a free option or an education option for some of these tools. And just to give you a little more background too, my master's degrees are in art history and library science. I actually, a couple years ago too, I also completed the postgraduate certificate in digital public humanities through George Mason University, where I actually worked previously before UNC-Charlotte. And for better or worse, I just enrolled in the professional master's for digital curation and management at UNC-Chapel Hill. So I'm a couple classes into that. So the goals for today, again, just kind of getting you, I know some people are more familiar with digital humanities than others. So kind of giving you a working understanding overview, again, overview of some of these online tools. And also at the end, and this will all be shared with you, as Devin was saying, is some reading, some of the texts that are really helpful, some of the journals to follow. I've even included too some of the people in the DH world who would probably be worthwhile if you're not already following them on Twitter. But I've got a few of those people listed as well. So just to give you, or get an understanding from everyone, this is the poll that Devin was mentioning with the poll everywhere. So you should have been given the link, I think. This is more for me to kind of get an idea of maybe what you're interested in with tools, because there's so much out there with the digital humanities, whether it's mapping, text mining, networking. You may have heard it called social networking too, online scholarship, and that can be things like online exhibits, online books too, image annotation, or anything else too that you're interested in. And hopefully we'll be able to cover some of that today. And I should say too, what I want to do is show you some of these tools, but also if we have time, we will try to demonstrate them a little bit too. However, if we end up running out of time, feel free to follow up with me by email, and I'm happy to help. And we can come back, feel free to kind of go through that, and then we can come back to the poll results too, maybe even at the end.
Yeah, so we, about half have answered so far.
Oh,
so
okay.
We'll give about 30 seconds more for people to respond.
Okay.
We have a question in the chat from Robert asking, can you define these? So
oh, the design. Okay, sure. Mapping, that there are different levels with mapping. Sometimes it's very much geographically focused. Some of these tools, actually, I'm going to show you StoryMap, which is really more like a visual story based on location. Text mining, that would be, if you can notice some of the databases now will actually let you go in and pull out certain words. Sometimes people will go through, like, say, the entire, there's a tool, actually, we'll talk about Voyant, where they've uploaded the entire works of, well, I should say not the entire works, but a good portion of the works of Shakespeare, where basically you can text mine and find certain terms that are repeated, make some of those connections between the terms. And when I talk about networking too, that's actually, we'll go through, it's these fun little interactive where you can see things that are connecting. For instance, I'll just tell you an example from my work. I started a artist book collection at my previous job. And we uploaded that all into a Google spreadsheet. And then we did networking, social networking with that to kind of see who the artists were working with. So it was automatically picking up, say, if authors were collaborating or artists were collaborating on certain books. You could kind of see their network itself. So you kind of get into that networking. It may be even not just the people, but it was connecting to, say, the materials they were using. So you could see kind of which artists were all interested in handmade paper, which ones were using acrylic painting. So it's really about those connections. Sometimes you'll hear it called networking. Sometimes you'll hear it called social networking. It's called a few different things. The online scholarship, really, that was more of a catch-all with online exhibits, something like an Omeka, ebooks too, if anyone's familiar with Scalar. Image annotation, and I'll show you a really fun tool, easy tool for this too. This is, say, taking an image, especially for if you're working people with very visual, you can connect these to books in your catalog. You can connect them to articles, other websites, even other images. And if there's anything else too that you're interested in, this is just kind of a sampling of what's available. And it can be a little overwhelming sometimes because there is so much.
All right, I
Okay.
just ended the poll and shared
Yeah.
out the
Oh,
results.
perfect.
Everyone should see them.
Yeah.
It's looking like text mining and online scholarship are kind of the focus of people's interest today.
Right. Okay, that's great. Yeah, and we should be covering all of those. And again, if you have more details, like, or more questions later on, detailed questions, feel free to contact me. Let's go to the next slide. Go ahead and minimize that. So in terms of defining DH or digital humanities, for those of you who, I know a lot of you are familiar with it, you may have noticed there are a lot of different definitions. This is actually one of my favorite websites to go to. What is digital humanities? Basically, every time you reload this, you get a different definition from someone working in the area. So you can see this is one quick, DH is the growing set of practices and projects geared around humanities inquiry that strategically involve digital resources. So that's kind of a fun one that I like to go to and just hit refresh and see what everyone is saying. But in terms of kind of getting a working definition for us today too, again, variety of perspectives, interpretations. I tend to think of it as an intersection. It is very interdisciplinary as well, with humanities, research, teaching, publishing, tools that are involved, technology, and also culture as a whole. Like I was saying too, the graduate certificate that I got was digital public humanities, but that was actually in the public history department at George Mason. So again, there's kind of that interdisciplinary area, as you can see too, and it's a very collaborative as well. And I should say too, with a lot of the projects I've worked on, I've always had at least probably one other person with some of the bigger projects. One of the first tools, and I really love this tool, you don't need to know coding or anything like that. It's StoryMapJS, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. It's from the Night Lab out of Northwestern. It's free, open source tool. It's actually based on Google Slides. And what's nice is it's basically the intention is to tell a visual story where locations are kind of the core. Could be a series of events, it could be objects, like I've done this with, and I'll show you an example too, with artist maps and kind of where some of the people we've been collecting, where they're working. I will say though, just as a cautionary tale, because it is free and open source, it can be a little glitchy sometimes. Like a few days before, as I was prepping some of my slides, all of a sudden I could see the names of my the maps I had created or the titles, but I couldn't actually see any of the content. So I got a little worried, but then the next day they were back to how they were supposed to be, because they had also disappeared from my libguides at that day too. So I don't know if they were working on something on the back end. But it does happen on occasion, but I feel like the pros outweigh the cons with their tools. Oh, actually, I don't know if you saw that too. Let me just go back. Because I've actually taught this in a workshop, I did actually create a handout previously, and that will be shared too with the slides as well. So that's the direct link. So you can see kind of what it looks like. This is an example where they've taken different historical travelers, and you can see kind of it goes through mapping. So you can see the mapping here, and you do have some choice with the background. These are actually plot points that you can click on, an image will come up, more detailed information will come here. So this is one of the examples. They kind of have a showcase that you can look at and go through. To show you more what the back end looks like, this is actually what I created for the North Carolina Artist Books collection here at UNC-Charlotte. So it gives you an idea of where we're collecting in the state. So you may see clusters in places like Boone or Asheville, trying to create things or collect things in Charlotte as well, because that's where we are. But again, it is interesting because it helps you visualize the data in a way you couldn't otherwise. So you do end up seeing a lot of these kind of these artist groupings. So you can see like Asheville is very active, Boone is very active. So it's a nice way to kind of make those connections and visualize the data in ways you couldn't otherwise. From this too, if you'll notice, I've actually uploaded for each of these an image of each of the books. For me too, I also linked back to the catalog so people can find more information. Some other details too about the materials, the artist. And this is what actually people will see. That was the back end. And again, that's Google Slides. So it's very easy. It's basically you just load everything. You do have some control over the HTML kind of in the source code where you can kind of change coloring and things like that. But basically, you can just scroll through these. And I don't know if it will let me do it from here. Yeah, just to get it. Can you see my libguide right now? From here, you can actually go through. So can everyone see that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So basically it's really easy. You can embed it. Like I just embedded this in my libguide. It was very easy. You'll notice here too, like sometimes you can get very detailed. It depends on how much geographic information you have. You can basically locate it to a street, a house, building. You can keep it fairly general. I have a couple examples here from the App State from the art department. So it actually zeroes in on that building. But it's nice because it does kind of give you an overview where basically like for this example, it's taking me through North Carolina and seeing that journey there. And again, it's very easy to embed, very easy to share these. Again, not really the download options. So that's very much more like a visual story. But there are other mapping options too. Again, ones that are free and free accounts. Like you can see this one, StoryMap, completely free, but something like Carto, maybe if you want to dig a little deeper with the, you can see location intelligence application, spatial analysis. If you want to look a little deeper, something like Carto would be helpful. They do have paid versions, but you'll notice they have free accounts for students and educators through GitHub and a developer pack with that. What's great is it provides the GIS and web mapping tools, very browser friendly, mobile friendly. And again, what I love about both of these is you don't need GIS or development experience to get into these. And just to kind of show you very quickly what you can do in Carto. Let me turn this sound down a little bit. Sounds a little bit like elevator music, but so you can see it's a different look and feel than StoryMap. StoryMap is very much image focused, moving through geographically, where this one really focuses on maybe the more traditional looking maps. We'll turn the music down, so that's not really necessary. But again, it's an easy way to really visualize data in a new way and make some of those connections. That is one of the things too that I do like to say about digital humanities. It helps you see the data in ways that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. Even just going back to artist books, when we looked at some of the mapping that we were doing and some of the social networking connections, we realized we were missing a whole state, this whole state of Utah that has a very active book art center. So that actually ended up helping us with our collection development. There we go. Going back to Night Lab and some of the tools they have, I found timelines to be very helpful, both with say LibGuides, but also through exhibits. This is one of the tools again from Night Lab, so it's free, open source, easy to use. And I should say with both of all of them, really, you log in with your Google account. Where StoryMap was based on slides, this one is based on Google spreadsheets. I will say what's really nice about this is, unlike the slides when they disappeared on me that one day, and I thought all my information was gone because I hadn't collected it somewhere else, because you actually go into Google Spreadsheet and that's where all your content is. So no matter what happens with TimelineJS, you have all of that content there, so you don't lose that. Again, they do have options if you want to customize some of this with JavaScript, but you don't have to. What's great is you can insert a lot of media with images. You can see Flickr, YouTube, Google Maps. So you have a lot of options with this. So again, very visual with the storytelling. But this time we're applying it to dates and events. So I actually used TimelineJS for an exhibit we had a couple years ago, celebrating the 80th anniversary of Batman, going through kind of the history of the comics, some of the notable issues, events that happened. This is the back end. So this is the Google spreadsheet that I had set up. And I know it's a little small, but hopefully you'll be able to look at that kind of after the fact. You can see the different headlines. They have really helpful handouts and guides to walk you through it as well. And this is what would be the front end. If you can see here too, so it starts off, you enter your date, you enter a title, any description information, plus you can add captions here too. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you too, kind of like with StoryMap, what that looks like. And this is actually taking us into Omeka, which is where we have our library exhibits. So you can see if we scroll down to the bottom, going through the whole list, you can see actually I was able to embed it directly into Omeka. So again, very interactive, mobile friendly, web friendly. Again, you can add as much information as you want. The only tricky thing is just be very careful of your dates in order to make sure they appear in the order that you want. Because sometimes I've left out a date or something like that, and suddenly things are in the wrong order. But again, you can customize this a little bit too, even without the backend information, like a black background, a white background. So it's kind of up to you with some of those things. You can change the size too. It walks you through that. So depending on how big the object you want to be, so you have a lot of choices already without even having to worry about coding. Some of the other ones too I did want to mention from Night Lab, they just have a whole great set of tools. So we looked at story map and timeline. There's also juxtapose, easy frame to frame comparison. I actually use that in, let me show, actually probably easier if I show you. This is an art student mural that they created for the architecture library. Again, so this is something I embedded into Omeka. So basically, you just have to make sure the images are roughly the same size for it to look correct. But you can see, so I labeled one before the mural as you slide it across. And then the difference here with after the mural installation. So again, very quick, very easy. The same thing here too with the VR stories where they have, it's called Scene. And just to show you what that looks like, again, you do want to be careful about your image size because sometimes that can make it look a little strange. You can see it does look a little warped, so you just kind of have to be careful with the image sizes. But you can see you can kind of scroll through, get a better idea of the space that it's in. They also have ones with audio. You can see SoundSite, Storyline. So again, they have a lot of tools, all free, open source. In terms of text analysis or text mining as well, you do have a lot of different options that again are low entry, free, or at least a free version of them. So I've mentioned a few of them here. We won't go through all of them just because of time constraints, but these do include links. So you can see a few here, Tag Crowd, Google Books, Overview. But the one I want to talk about, focus on here is Voyant, just because there are so many options within Voyant. Different things you can do with creating word clouds, making those networking connections. You can see it's open source, web-based application performing text analysis. So basically, once you do the text mining step, you can import that up into this web application. So again, all online. But it helps you, you do have a variety, I'll kind of go through that too, a variety of upload options. You can copy and paste into the search box. You can upload files. If you just want to play around with it, they all already have preloaded Shakespeare and Jane Austen, which is kind of fun just to kind of see what it can do. But again, it's a great way for finding patterns, connections. It is customizable too. So for instance, say you upload 10 Dickens books and you want to get rid of the word the or a or some of those very common words, you can easily do that into add that, customize it, and it will get rid of that. So this is an example too from the preloaded, the Jane Austen works that they have. Again, you can see we have lots of different ways that we could look at the data. And I should say too, like this, the word cloud, you'll notice you have options here. You can actually link those out, share them, which basically means you can email them, you can embed them, you can download them as an image too. So you do have a lot of options. So like for this one, you can also too, you can set the number of words you want it to look for. Then here you can select one of those words and see the trends. So this actually is giving us the years of publication, the books, and the trends, say certain words that keep appearing. Like for this one, I think I picked the word miss and seeing how many times that one shows up. So you can see kind of some of the patterns here. Again, you can embed it, you can share it, you can download as an image. A bunch of other options. These all pop out too, I should say too, just to show you an example. Something like this. So you can see word cloud, social networking. They have bubble lines, trends, correlations. So you can see the word cloud here, an example of the social networking as well. You can always like, this is just a screenshot, but these are interactive. So you can kind of move these around if you wanted to highlight certain terms and see how they connect. Again, options for exporting this information, whether it's through a URL, embedding code, or you can see an image here too. And I should say too, this I went ahead and included in terms of the text analysis, because it actually came up on a library listserv recently for an architecture librarian, where they had a faculty member reach out to them and asked about crowdsourcing transcription projects and some guides here. So again, we won't go through some of these, but this I really wanted to include just because it was kind of a real world example of what you might be approached with from your library users. So you can see the Smithsonian here too, another crowdsourcing. This is actually a really great blog here too. She has a lot of amazing examples of crowdsourced transcriptions that have worked well. The other thing I find very useful, especially as the arts and architecture librarian, but also some of my colleagues have been using this in their one of the intro freshman classes with introduction to writing. It's called ThingLink. Now they do have a paid version, which does of course allow you to do more things, but they also have an education account that you can get. It does limit you to the number of images you can upload or views. For me too, because I've embedded them in my libguides and included them in instruction, I actually got a notice that I had reached my view limit, which basically just means there's a watermark added. It's still very usable. So basically what I've done with these, I've used them both as a research and a teaching tool, annotating images with text, whether that's text kind of describing the work or the image itself, whether it's connecting to other links, say a museum link about the image, even other images themselves, quick links to say articles that are relevant, books that are relevant. So again, that research element there too. In terms of login options, and I should say a lot of these, you may have noticed, you don't have to create a separate login. They're basically working from other accounts you already have, which is great for me because I can only remember so many passwords. So this one actually has multiple options, whether it's Google, Facebook, Twitter. Again, free educational and paid account options. You can only do annotate video if you have the paid account and the 360 views, but I found the image options pretty robust and kind of what I needed. And you can see that was the image or the message. I've exceeded my view link, but honestly, they're still usable in the libguides and in teaching. And this is actually a screenshot of what it looks like if you go to my libguide that I created for art history. So you can see basically it's embedded in here. So I've done it under the guise of brainstorming topics and search terms. So what I'll do sometimes with classes especially is I'll walk them through the process. If they have an image or an artwork of interest, we can brainstorm search terms. Sometimes they'll add the search terms in here as points. Even if actually they don't have an idea of what they want to do yet, but they have like just a vague idea. Again, it's kind of whittling that down with topics. You can see this is what it looks like once you actually click on it. So you can see you have some different options from the icons. Sometimes what I've done is I've actually kept all my links to images as one icon, my links to videos as a different icon, books in the catalog is a different one. So you do have some choices here. And so like this particular image, I've linked out to other websites. You can see like the Met, videos, images, again, going directly into the catalog, even my own text too, with talking about maybe the symbolism in this particular work, just to show you what that looks like in action too. So you can see, again, a lot of these are very interactive, which is one of the nice things too, and especially so critical for digital humanities, that interactive part of the technology. So you can see some of these are texts where search terms maybe that would be useful in the catalog and the databases. Again, going back to other websites. You can see even just the information too for the artist and the date. Again, so you've got a lot of options here too. So it's very versatile. But what's nice is it's very quick, it's very easy. You can easily do this in a, say, a session, a library instruction session, or if you're doing it online, very easy to set up and then embed it into a LibGuide or a website of some kind. The other thing I did want to talk about in terms of images is reverse image searching, which some of you may be familiar with. The two that I tend to use the most are Google Images and TinEye. And for those of you who haven't used it before, you can upload either an image itself, say from your computer that you've saved, or a URL. But what's nice about this too is, especially with a lot of the doctored kind of photoshopped images that may not be accurate, it's easy to find kind of, say, the image source, see who else is using it, but also finding related images too. So it makes some of those connections for you. But because it is telling you kind of where it's coming from, it is really related to information and visual literacy. And actually a group of us at UNC-Charlotte and Atkins created a visual literacy LibGuide where we do actually go through some of the reverse image searching options, kind of the benefit of those. So you can see this is what you'll see if you go to Google, plus TinEye as well. I had another colleague too who they had a very popular special collection of postcards from the 1920s that they found other people were using without crediting them. So that is another option. You can kind of see who else is using your images, say from your collections. Now this one, Omeka. Some of you may be familiar with Omeka. It's been around for a little while now. It started out specifically more for exhibits, but it's really morphed into even more than that. People will use it for more kind of, say, online publications, like almost like ebooks, toolkits. So again, a lot of different variety. But again, it was initially aimed at, say, libraries, museums, archives. And it's a way to highlight exhibits, also scholarly collections. This is all open source. It's a content management system, web platform, publishing platform. Again, like some of the other options, like, say, ThingLink, this does have free and paid options, depending on how much customization you need, how much you really want to kind of get into the weeds of it to the back end. And this was created by the Center for History and New Media at George Mason. And I will say too, kind of like Night Lab tools, because this is free open source, they do have guides online, but a lot of it really has been taken over by the users in terms of help. So they have great forums that you can go to for asking questions. Omeka specifically, I know some of the people who work there, and I've posted issues I've had with Omeka, kind of things that aren't working, whether it's a plugin or something else. And what's great, they're quick to respond. Plus you get all the other users who are very active in Omeka, kind of giving advice and giving tips as well. So it's a great community in that sense. This is one of the examples they have on their Omeka showcase. But what's nice is they give you a few in there that you can kind of see what you can do if you haven't used it before, what it's capable of. So again, you can make it very visual. Again, you have customization options with some of these themes if you want the headings over here or up top. So there is a fair amount of customization even with the free version. We actually had a student who started an exhibit, a virtual exhibit in Omeka with the free version. And then we ended up transferring it over to our paid account because she was actually doing then an in-person exhibit. So what was great though is we had the in-person exhibit where people could come visit the cases, but then we had so much of this information online, just a lot of details that you couldn't get otherwise, combined with the images, combined with links to the catalog for books, more information, links to videos explaining the objects as well. So again, very complementary in that sense. So this was, I think I showed you this one quickly. This is an example specifically that I created at UNC-Charlotte. This is that artist student mural that I talked about. So again, you can see you can insert, these actually are links. You can even scroll through a lot of different options on the back end. This gives people, when they first come to the website, some options for scrolling through, background information. If you look up here, we actually have different headings. So say if people are interested in finding out background information about the artist, the individual students who were involved, some of the class readings that were used, timeline. Again, I used the TimelineJS for this and embedded it in there. This actually goes through the project stages, views of the mural. So again, when I showed you the juxtapose and the scene for kind of that virtual reality VR, those were here. And actually what we were able to do is customize this. This was a theme that was fairly clean and streamlined, but we wanted to make it match the library website, the look of our library website. So we were able to just do a kind of like a quick few things in the back end, and we added, you can see the symbol here too, the color. So it fits a little more, it's a little more cohesive now. And again, what's nice is it's not very complicated for some of these customizations. And also too, again, I just want to repeat the forum for asking questions is really helpful. So to show you, for those of you who haven't worked with Omeka before, this is the Omeka S version, and you can see the background. It's fairly similar to the other versions too. For this particular one, I actually created my own template for exhibits because I wanted certain information to show up every time, like access rights, subject headings, dates, those kind of contributors, those kinds of things. So again, a lot of customization on this back end. You can see some of the plugins that are available too, like this CSV. So say you have a spreadsheet with a lot of information. Instead of having to do like hand enter each item one by one, you can actually upload a whole spreadsheet and it makes things, I should just say, it makes things a lot easier. The only thing is, and I will say I learned this in the very beginning through trial and error, this is when they talk about clean data or tidy data being very important. Again, kind of going back to that artist book example that I was talking about, we uploaded all the information from the catalog, plus some extra metadata into a spreadsheet. We converted that to a CSV file and then imported it. But we realized what we were doing in some of the columns, say for materials used, it was handmade paper, acrylic paint, photograph, something like that. We originally had included those all in the same column, and the plugin didn't know how to handle that. So it was combining photography and acrylic paint and handmade paper all as one item. So basically we just had to separate those out and have multiple columns, say labeled medium or something like that. So again, it kind of goes back into that tidy data. So it's a little more work on the back end when you first start, but it will make things a lot easier as you're going forward. And again, they have a whole bunch of plugins that make things really easy, like embedding PDFs so people can read them online. Some of these are actually created by the Center History New Media, but again, because it is this community of users, a lot of people who use Omeka have created their own plugins, like things that they realized would be valuable, that other people would probably like too. So they've shared those. And you can find that either through the Omeka website or GitHub. Definitely worth looking into if you want some of that customization. You can even see like something like there's a Zotero link too. So if you're looking for adding more references, things like that with the research component. The other one I did want to talk about too, I've spent a lot of time in Omeka. I've played around in Scalar a little bit. Both Omeka and Scalar probably have a little bit more of a learning curve than some of the other tools that we've talked about. But again, once you kind of get into it, you can see kind of how it works. There's a lot of helpful guides out there. They all have really helpful forums too for asking questions. Just like Omeka, this is free open source. This really started off more as for like ebooks, online book scholarship. Just like Omeka though, it's morphed into some other things, like you'll see them using it as tool. I'll show you an example where it's basically information literacy toolkit. Sometimes people will also use this for exhibits as well. So basically they describe it as long form, writing long form, born digital scholarship. So again, online books, exhibits, toolkits. You can assemble media from multiple sources, combine them with the writing, which I should say you can do with Omeka too. Also minimal technical expertise is required. So you don't need to know a lot about the coding or the back end, which does make it a lot easier. This is one example I really love. This is primary source literacy that's from USC libraries. And you can see basically it like a table of contents. If there's a little arrow. So I just kind of clicked on some of these. You can see how it whittles down even more. And again, customizable too. So they uploaded their own images, their own theme. Just to show you, this is very mobile friendly as well, which really goes for all of these tools. So basically, this is the difference of what it would look like on a cell phone, since we know a lot of the library patrons are using cell phones for their work. You can see areas like assignments. And this was actually a different example from Arizona State. There we go. What's really nice too is because it's not just an ebook, kind of what we traditionally think of as an ebook, if you'll notice, they have these visualization options. So again, when I mentioned things like networking or social networking, you'll notice too, they've taken things like, say, the table of contents and connected it to other terms. Again, this is a screenshot, but normally this would be interactive and you can kind of move things around. You can also sort it up here. So you've got some different options, which is really nice. So again, it's seeing that data or that information in a way we wouldn't be able to see otherwise. And that's really how I tend to think about digital humanities is we have these tools that allow us to see the information in different ways and give us new perspectives. And I mentioned too that there are some people, if you're not already following them, really put out some great information and they've done a lot in the area. I've actually taken classes both with Sheila Brennan and Sharon Leon, who were previously at George Mason, Dan Cohen, who also was previously at George Mason as well. Again, that Center for History and New Media. Some others, Miriam Posner out at UCLA. And this is all included too. So when you get the slides, that'll link you right to their Twitter. Also, I just attended a workshop with Kaiman too, very really informative. And what's nice too is like both Brennan, Leon, and Cohen are coming from history backgrounds. You can see Miriam Posner is coming from the information studies. But you'll notice too, like Kaiman, he originally came from a theater background. So again, very interdisciplinary, a lot of visual information too, not just text. And this is a selection of journals. Some of these are free and open source, some of them are subscription. You may be familiar with some of the titles, but again, this is for you to kind of look at later. Some of the titles, a brief description. What's great too is to kind of go through those and see what people are publishing, what new projects people are working on, maybe some of the challenges they're experiencing. A selection of books here as well. These are ones that we actually have in our collection too. And I should say, like some of these, they're actually updated versions coming out too. Oh, here it is, like this one. There was a 2019, there's actually a new version just because it's changing so fast and new things are coming out. So at this point, it looks like we've got 15 minutes left. So I guess we could open it up for questions. Or if anyone wanted me to demonstrate anything else or some of the tools.
We have a question that was from earlier in the session
Oh,
from
yeah.
Robert saying, is this the product that allows one to overlay older photos of scenes and buildings over current 3D views? But I'm not sure what he's referring to.
Oh, okay. We'll say I know there are like Omeka, you can do that. I played around with that a little bit. Carto, you can do that with actually StoryMap. It's a little more complicated. StoryMap has an option called gigapixel, where you can actually do that. And I've actually done that with images, say from exhibits. Oh, juxtapose. Yeah. That's the one that's really more visual than text. Let's see. Yeah, recurrent 3D views. I've never tried it with the 3D views, but I think you probably could. Because it's basically just opening up, trying to think if I've seen it with like even GIFs and things. I think you can, but I haven't played around with it, but I think it's fairly flexible. The main thing for that juxtapose to make it look normal was just making the image sizes compatible. Because I know when I first started that, I had one image that was too small and it looked kind of wonky.
Feel free to submit questions or bring up experiences if you're working with a particular faculty member or class right now or a student. Robert's asking, what book would you recommend as a simple step-by-step beginning intro to digital humanities?
That's a good question. I will say I didn't include her in the Twitter links of people to follow just because she's not very active on social media. But Johanna Drucker, who's out at UCLA, and I think some of her images, I would basically say anything by her on digital humanities is a good kind of step-by-step. And even going back in, I think, let me see if I can open up. And say, can you see my LibGuide?
Yes.
Let me scroll. Oh, I think those are the journals. Okay, sorry for the scrolling, but let me go back up to the books. Yeah, like this one, this is actually an open access book, Introduction to Digital Humanities. So again, you can see concept, methods, tutorials. I would say that one's probably a good one for an overview. This one's more the kind of research methods for digitizing and curating. This one too, I would say this one, it's listed as a primer. This one, even though it's not so much how to, this one, the debates in digital humanities, again, there's a newer version too that just came out. That actually I found really helpful, kind of reading from people in the area, kind of their approaches, their perspectives, kind of what they're doing. So it's a nice complement to some of those introductory books.
Yeah, a request if you could show the slide with the Twitter handles again.
Oh, yeah.
Just a heads up, everybody. You'll get a copy of the slides later, along with a link to the recording. If you came in a couple minutes after 2 o'clock, you will be able to review what you missed in that recording. We have a question from Angelina here. Yeah. Is there a good website to use as a learning tool, as an introduction to learn how to code?
I would say for coding, I've gone into GitHub and looked for things there. Honestly, it's there's a lot of stuff in there that people have uploaded to kind of help other people in that area. And even kind of going back, I'll go back to the Twitter link too. But if you go into this tool repository, this is actually pretty helpful too, where it lists different types of tools and kind of helping you get started. And actually, I'm trying to remember, didn't include it, but there is actually, you know what I'll do? Because there is a website or a group that I've actually been doing kind of free online little classes, mini classes. that they have kind of for Python and Java and those kind of things. I will track that down and email that so it can be sent to the entire group. Because I will say I found that one nice too, because it's not a course that you have to pay for. Basically, they're just free instructions. A lot of them are self-paced too. But I would say also too, these repositories for tools are also a really good starting point. And a lot of the tools, I should say again, that I mentioned have really good guides in terms of getting you started as well. And you will even get, going back to here, let's see, I can't remember where, maybe a little further back. But I think I have one for Omeka.
We have a question here.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit more about networking and how it works.
Oh, sure. Some of the networking I did actually was through the Google spreadsheets that no longer, or not the spreadsheets, but the Google version that no longer exists. But what's nice is, let me actually go through and show you some of the examples maybe in action. That might be helpful. That's a little further back, I think. Yeah, let's actually go into Voyant. So you can see this one, multiple ways that you can get in and upload. So if you just had a whole bunch of text you wanted to copy and paste, when I've taken classes, they've given us files, kind of preloaded files that we could upload from here too. I'm just going to open one of the ones that's already up here so you can see choose your corpus. And they have both Shakespeare plays and Austen novels. So I showed you Austen novels, but let's go into Shakespeare. So you can see it automatically creates some of these here. Let me see if I can move this here again. So you can see you have some options. Let me go in. This is a little different way of looking at the social networking.
Catherine's asking, is there a long wait time when you upload a lot of text while Voyant processes the information?
Yeah, it could be. And that's kind of one of the upside, it's free and open source. Downside, it's free and open source, so it takes a little longer. So it can take a while. Let's see.
That is nice because then you're not having to do the text mining yourself or setting up
right
sort of complicated algorithm or set of code. One question that we received from the questionnaire beforehand,
yeah,
was somebody was asking what sort of infrastructure or tools do you need to establish a digital humanities program in a library or on campus?
Honestly, in terms of tools, we actually started at UNC-Charlotte. I guess it was a couple years ago. We basically had a few librarians that were interested in digital humanities. We kind of started a reading group because one person was taking an ALA online course. That morphed into creating a forum where we invited faculty and some graduate students who are working on projects like this. We do have things like a visualization lab, which does help with some of like the VR headsets and some of these, but you really don't need something that fancy or elaborate because there are so many free tools. It's basically just having interested people in the library, learning some of these tools, becoming familiar with them. Sometimes that's really what we do is we have faculty who will approach us with a project in mind, say like mapping, for instance, and we just kind of go through question and answer of what they're really looking for. So is it would something like story map work, or do they need something a little more intense like Carto? So it's really just kind of having, and I should say too, we also did end up creating a libguide specifically, and that's included. The link to that is included in the slides, which gives you kind of just a nice overview of some of the tools that are out there, whether it's text mining, mapping. We've included some links to guides as well. So I would say, oh, this is the one I was trying to show you. I would say really just having kind of maybe a guide that people can go to, and having people who are interested in it, creating that guide where people can kind of easily access those tools and find them, find some informational. We also created, I should say, too, a Google group. So basically we'll send out announcements too. It kind of followed up from the forum that we had, where interested faculty and graduate students would join the group. So it's a way of kind of keeping up communication too. So sometimes we'll have them send kind of projects they're working on and share that. But also what we try to do to maintain that kind of activity is we have a monthly list of things we'll send out, whether it's about conferences or new publications, maybe some other grant opportunities, things like that, or what the library is doing specifically. So I don't know if that answers your questions. Basically, it's kind of the people who are willing to do some of that work and make those connections.
Yeah, I think that's some great practical advice for people to take into their libraries. That was just something that was floating around in the questionnaire that I wanted to make sure was covered.
And also, let me open this up too, so you can see with that social networking, the connections there. So this, I did a limited number of terms. And you'll notice too, like things like this, because we're in Shakespeare and it has all the Roman numerals, that's something where you could actually go through and get rid of those and say, don't give me Roman numerals, or don't give me the word the, or something like that. So if I were to go back into that, yeah, I was trying to see if it would. Yeah, so usually you can actually, let me go back into here. Yeah, here we go. This is what I was looking for. You can actually increase the number of terms it's looking for and making those connections. So really kind of depending on how detailed you want to get. And you'll see that then translates or should translate. So we're picking up a few more here. But just to kind of show you, let me link this one out too. So basically, it's really kind of like how you want to visualize the data, whether it's looking at the most common words here that really kind of keep cropping up, or whether it was the other option too, where you're seeing how those words actually connect. And again, that's under links. And notice, oops, oh, my battery's dying. Yeah, and you'll notice too, it's like you've got some other options here too. So again, if you want to define the options for these two, again, it's pretty customizable. It is all web-based, so you're not really downloading it to your computer, which in some way is nice because you don't have to worry about the storage. But again, it's like these are movable. So these are all pretty interactive. The other one,
have you used these sorts of tools or shared them with any undergrad courses or?
Yeah, actually, I have a little bit, especially sometimes with these ones is really what I'll show them is like, say, the word clouds.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty popular one too, just because it is kind of interactive and it shows them. So what I've even done too is like, say, taking polls and things like that, and then I'll turn it into a word cloud. which gets them a little more involved. I noticed this one because it's like things move that usually gets their
you just
attention.
play around with it.
Yeah. So anything that's interactive like that usually ends up being pretty helpful.
We are just at 3 o'clock. I don't think we've had any questions in the last couple of minutes.
Oh.
Folks, I'm glad that this has been helpful and that you've enjoyed learning about all these resources and tools that are available to you. Check out that follow-up email that you'll see in your inboxes later today, along with the slides, the recording, the feedback survey. Please give us feedback on the session. It's not only helpful for me, but it's also helpful for Jenna and other facilitators that we've had in the past with how they present material, instruction, any sort of suggestions you can provide. And also, if you have any recommendations for future topics, that survey is one of the ways that we are able to offer everything that we've been able to offer in the last year or so. One final thing, we have a webinar tomorrow on copyright and digital media in the classroom that's being hosted by Will Cross from NC State. So if you're looking for one more thing to get training on this week, feel free to sign up for that as well. And have a good rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.
For those of us in North Carolina, it's 80 degrees right now. So go outside, enjoy it.
Yes.
Take care, everyone.
And again, too, that's my email if you do have questions further on, too.
Thanks so much, Jenna.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, everyone.